Have you ever heard of a former police officer turning into a senseless monster of a human being? Today, we're diving into the shocking case of Grant Hardin, a police officer turned murderer, whose true identity was uncovered only after a DNA match from a crime committed almost 20 years ago. Grant Hardin was a 50-year-old police officer with a horrifying secret. He had been apprehended on suspicion of murder, and during his interrogation, he tried everything he could to escape, revealing the extent of his crimes and bad behavior. On February 23rd, James Appleton pulled into a parking lot on Glen Ridge Road to take a phone call with his brother-in-law. Suddenly, a loud banging sound was heard over the phone and the line went dead. A passerby saw a white Chevrolet Malibu parked behind James's car, which quickly sped away after the loud noise. When the passerby checked on James, he was found dead with a gunshot wound to the head. Gateway, Arkansas, where the incident occurred, is a small town of 400 people. It was quickly determined that the owner of the Chevy was Grant Hardin, who had lived in the town his whole life. Later that night, Grant's vehicle was stopped at a police roadblock after he took his family out for dinner. He was quickly brought in for questioning, but unfortunately, his experience in law enforcement made the interrogation one of the most difficult that Arkansas police had ever had to deal with. The interrogation began casually, with Detective Chamberlain asking questions about Grant's career. He assumed that, as a fellow police officer, he could build trust with Grant and get him to relax so he would give up information more easily. But this strategy had the opposite effect. Grant was then read his rights, but he decided to make it more difficult for the detectives. "I don't know what's going on. I'm feeling sickly," Grant said.
Here's the thing. I want to talk to you about what you've done today, okay? Can you just take me through when you woke up this morning to when you got stopped by the police out there in, what's the name of that road you were on? I'm sorry, I'm going to drop. Glen Ridge?
I'm not going to say anything after I've been read those rights yet.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on. I am kind of sickly to what I'm here for and things.
Feeling exposed and inferior as a suspect for the first time in his life. Given his disturbing body language, it was clear that he was also feeling anxious about the situation. The detectives left the room for a few minutes to talk about their approach, and this gave Grant time to worry and form even more anxiety about his situation. When the detectives re-entered the room, they tried a different approach, stating that they just needed to clear Grant of any wrongdoing so he could go on his way. But Grant had other ideas. He refused to talk until he was informed of the reason for his detention. "Would you be willing to talk to me about your day, knowing that I'd need to rule you out of something?" the detective asked. "If you didn't do anything wrong today, you have nothing to worry about."
Would you be willing to talk to me about your day, knowing that I need to rule you out of something? Or like, I'm just, if you didn't do anything wrong today, you have nothing to worry about.
Yes, I would have liked to, but before
Yeah.
the rights were read. So
Okay.
not knowing what's going on.
Yeah, and you understand as a detective, we read those rights to everybody who comes in here. It's not just you. It happens to everybody that walks through this room and talks to us.
Grant agreed to talk, but only before his rights were read to him. As a former police officer, Grant was fully aware of all of this. He knew that everybody that was interviewed, innocent or not, had to be read their rights, which essentially completely invalidated this as the real reason that he wasn't talking. He was just using it as an excuse to refuse to talk and possibly even to stall for time. The detective asked Grant questions, but Grant remained silent, exercising his legal right to remain silent. This greatly hindered the investigation as a whole and completely prevented the detectives from making progress. Detective Chamberlain appeared visibly annoyed and decided to take a break from the interrogation, as letting emotions take control in an investigation like this could be extremely dangerous for the detectives. However, this time alone could also give the suspects the chance to come up with a plan. Grant requested to leave, but the detective refused, and the interrogation continued. Oddly enough, in many other investigations like this, at this point, an officer may attempt to come to a decision regarding the suspect. The interview was obviously at a complete standstill, and no progress was being made in any direction. The standard protocol would be to either gather the information needed to charge the suspect for a crime, or release them based on a lack of evidence. But whether the detective thought he could extract more information or if it was an ego-based decision, Grant was told to stay and continue the interrogation. "Well, I can see that we can do this all night. I mean, it doesn't bother me. You're going to continue to be a suspect until I find out otherwise."
I'm being silent.
Well, I can see that. We can do this all night. I mean, it doesn't bother me. You're going to continue to be a suspect until I find out otherwise.
Okay.
The police then tried to take some time to piece together more of the story, talking to witnesses to try and place Grant at the scene of the crime. Despite his silence being perfectly legal and acceptable, it greatly increased the detective's suspicion towards him. The suspicion was only heightened when Grant's wife said that his only alibi was that she thought he was spreading grasses at the time of James' death. All signs pointed towards Grant, and Detective Chamberlain went back in for round 3. Detective Cordero was talking to Grant's wife, trying to get a timeline of where Grant was and where he wasn't on the day of the crime. The detective talked to Grant, saying that he wasn't trying to get him or his family in trouble, but he needed to know what happened. He gave Grant an opportunity to tell his story in 3 chapters: what happened that day, what led up to the incident, and what happened to lead him up to that point. Grant remained silent, and the detective pressed him further, stating that they had witnesses that put him at the scene of the crime. They physically saw him there, and the detective needed to know why it happened. Grant still refused to talk, and the detective eventually ended the interrogation. At the time of the murder, when the 2 cars were parked up beside each other, the man in the white Chevrolet waved to the passerby past before the gun was fired. As they passed, they were able to get a good look at the driver. Cordero tried to get Grant to open up about what had happened on the day of the murder, but Grant was hesitant to speak. She tried to create a connection with him by invoking his manhood. "I think you have a lot to live for, a beautiful family. The way I look at it is men face their mistakes and they own up to them."
I think you have a lot to live for. Beautiful family, who I've had the privilege of talking to. The way I look at it is you're a man. Men face their mistakes and they own up to them. And they figure out what happened and figure out how to solve it and move on. Like I said, I'm honestly here to help you. I want you to understand that. I wouldn't spend my time in here with you if I didn't. And that something happened today that needs to be explained. Did you make a mistake today?
Talking about TV shows and sleep schedules, hoping that it would help her extract information from him. However, as soon as she started asking him questions about the case again, he shut down and refused to answer any more questions. Eventually, after hours of back and forth, Grant asked for a lawyer, ending the interrogation. On October 16, 2017, Grant Hardin pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder of James Appleton. However, he refused to reveal his motive, leaving Appleton's family without closure to this day. As Grant was being prosecuted, a shocking revelation was made that turned him into a senseless monster of a human being. During his DNA testing, it was found that his DNA was already in the system under an unknown name for a crime committed almost 20 years ago. In November of 1997, a teacher at Frank Tilbury Elementary School was assaulted at gunpoint in the teacher's lounge bathroom. The perpetrator left only the skin left on her clothes, and police struggled to identify him. After 20 years, Grant Hardin's DNA was found to be a perfect match, and he was hit with a 14-year sentence on top of the 21 years for the murder of James Appleton. What's even more shocking is that Rogers police had obtained a John Doe warrant back in 2003, allowing them to arrest an unknown suspect and bypass the statute of limitations. And as such, Grant Hardin was sentenced to 35 years in prison, meaning that he'll likely live out the rest of his life behind bars. This case is a reminder of how DNA technology can bring justice and closure to victims and their families, even after decades of waiting. Let us know your thoughts on this case in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true crime videos.